The economy. You hear about it all the time, right? It's this huge, kind of complicated thing that's always in the news. But it's not just some abstract idea. It affects our jobs, our savings, pretty much our entire lives. So today, we're going to pop the hood on this thing and really see how it all works. I mean, have you ever really wondered what's going on behind all those headlines? What does something like inflation or a recession actually mean for you and me? Well, that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to connect the dots and break it all down piece by piece. To understand the big machine, you have to start with the smallest, most basic parts. So let's kick things off with the absolute fundamentals of how anything, and I mean anything, gets made and sold. Okay, so first things first, it all starts with something called capital. Now, this isn't just about money. It's also the physical stuff, the equipment, the land, the buildings that you need to produce things. Imagine a company wants to start making computers. Their capital is the cash to build a factory and fill it with all the right machinery. Next up, you need materials. Makes sense, right? These are the raw ingredients, the actual parts that get turned into a finished product. For that computer company we're talking about, this would be all the little microchips, the plastic for the casing, the wires. You get the idea. And here is the essential human piece of the puzzle, labor. This is literally the work that people do. It's what transforms all that capital and all those materials into something you'd actually want to buy. We're talking about the engineers who design the computer, the folks on the assembly line putting it together, and the managers making sure it all runs smoothly. So you see the pattern here? It's a pretty simple but incredibly powerful sequence. A business invests its capital, it buys the materials it needs, it hires labor to do the work, and voila, you've got a consumer good, like a brand new computer, ready to hit the shelves. So now that we have a product, where does it actually go? Well, it enters the market. And you can think of the market as just a place, any place, where buyers and sellers get together. And this place, it has its own set of rules. Really, the most important rule of all comes down to two key forces, supply and demand. You can think of these two as being in a constant tug of war. And what are they fighting over? The price of pretty much everything. Let's break that down. When supply is high, let's say there are tons and tons of computers for sale, sellers have to compete with each other for your business. And how do they do that? Usually by lowering their prices. But when supply is low, like if a big freeze wipes out most of the orange crop, the few sellers who do have oranges can charge a lot more, simply because they know we buyers don't have many other options. Now this slide shows the other side of that coin perfectly. Demand. Just look at this chart. It's tracking someone named Keisha and her apple buying habits. You see that line? As the price for each apple goes down, the number of apples she's willing to buy goes up. It's a super simple but perfect way to see how price changes what we as consumers decide to do. Okay, let's zoom out again. When you take all of these little individual transactions, millions of people like Keisha buying apples, millions of companies selling computers, and you put them all together, you start to see a much bigger pattern. You start to see the rhythm of the economy. So this rhythm often kicks off with a growth phase. You might hear people call it a boom. This is when businesses are feeling really optimistic. They start investing capital to expand, they hire more people, they ramp up production. For a while, everything's looking great. But here's the thing. That super fast growth, it can't last forever. Eventually, the market might just get flooded with products, or maybe costs start to creep up. The whole machine starts to cool off a bit, and the economy enters a slowdown. And if that slowdown gets worse, if it really deepens, it can turn into a full-blown recession. Now, all that earlier optimism starts to turn into pessimism. Businesses start cutting back on production, and unfortunately, this is usually when people start losing their jobs. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's a cycle, remember? Eventually, the economy hits a bottom, and then it starts a recovery. Things slowly but surely start picking up again, and that leads us right back towards a new phase of growth. And this slide right here puts that whole story together. This is the business cycle. That wavy line you see is tracking gross domestic product, which is basically the total value of everything a country produces. You can see it moving through growth, then a slowdown, a recession, and a recovery. It's a constant, natural rhythm. So is this whole machine just running on its own? Not quite. The government actually has a set of levers it can pull to try and steer the economy and, maybe smooth out some of those really big booms and busts. And the two main toolkits it has are called fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy is when the government itself adjusts its own spending or changes our taxes. Monetary policy, on the other hand, is handled by the central bank. For the US, that's the Federal Reserve, or just the Fed, and that's all about managing the country's money supply. So let's just focus on the Fed's tools for a second. If the economy is feeling sluggish, the Fed can try to boost it by buying up government bonds and lowering interest rates. That makes it cheaper to borrow money, which encourages all of us to spend more. But what if the economy is getting too hot and there's a risk of runaway inflation? Well, the Fed does the exact opposite. It sells bonds and raises interest rates. That makes it more expensive for you to get a car loan or a mortgage, which helps slow down spending across the whole economy. Okay, so after all this talk about these big cycles and government policies, let's bring it all the way back down to the single most important component in this entire economic machine, and that's you. Seriously, think about it. You're not just one thing in this system. You're playing a bunch of different roles all at once. When you go to your job, you're a worker. You supply the labor we talked about at the very beginning. When you go to the store, you're a consumer. Your choices create the demand that sets prices. And even when you just save money, you're providing the capital that helps businesses invest and grow. Your daily choices really, really matter. And because you are such a key player, it's worth remembering this old Latin saying, let the buyer beware. In a free market, we as consumers have an incredible amount of power and choice. But with that comes the responsibility to be smart, be informed, and look out for ourselves. So that leaves us with one final question to chew on. When you combine all your different roles, as a worker who provides labor and as a consumer who drives demand, just how much influence do you, one person, actually have on this gigantic, complex machine?